But for him, he was like,
All right. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in intergenerational transfer.
Intergenerational transfer.
That's the name of the podcast.
No, it should be like that's a new Drake. That's a new Drake's track. Gen transfer.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is your host Yoshino, and you're listening to episode number 119 of Artist Decoded. And I'm here right now with filmmaker and co-host of Artist Decoded, Saman Kesh.
Co-host is present.
And we're here with artist and filmmaker Andrew Thomas Huang.
We kind of have a little two-parter for this one. So we'll catch up and talk about that more later. But for now, Andrew's here.
How would you pronounce your name?
Yeah.
My family always says Wang, but that's kind of a mispronunciation that we've just adopted. But Huang.
When other people have the same last name and they pronounce it different, it always makes me pronounce your name totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. We would say Wang, and it was the brunt of boner jokes all throughout middle school.
Andy Wang.
Wangy, yeah. No, it's a really common last name. There's a YouTube celebrity named Andrew Huang. I confuse us all the time.
Really?
Oh yeah, he like writes music on the fly and stuff. And he's pretty popular. Yeah. Oh, there's also a music video producer named Andrew Huang. Yeah. So the people would confuse us too. So it's a common name. That's why I use my middle name in my professional work, because there's just so many of us. Yeah. I don't know. I totally thought about that. I mean, as a kid, to be totally honest, as a kid, I hated having a Chinese last name. That to have your ethnic background kind of permanently stamped in your surname kind of just felt like in the 80s and 90s just felt like that was limiting, or you don't, because you never saw anybody in entertainment with an Asian last name, so it made it harder to kind of envision a future.
Oh, and kind of like your place in that system.
Yeah, I thought about coming up with another moniker or something for myself just to remove myself a little bit, but I couldn't come up with anything that didn't feel like awfully cheesy. So, I just went with what I had, which are very, anglicized names. And I have people sometimes reach out to me and they're like, "Hi, Andrew Thomas." Like they don't know how to address me, and it's like, you just call it,
A.T. Huang.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I think P.T. Anderson has a good abbreviation precedent. So. Yeah.
And then W.S. fucked it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that was very, my heritage is cooked in my fucking first name. So it was like hard as fuck. But luckily.
But Saman is such a fucking cool name.
It's easy when you know how to say it. But there are times where people were like Saman, blah, blah, blah. And it took me a long time to build the courage.
You probably had some semen jokes in there.
Oh, for sure, dude.
I was just like, oh man.
Yeah, but I think that's also what's messed up, is that there are so many English names that just we're conditioned to think that they sound cool. It's fucked up. It's true, but it's true. We're just conditioned to think that you need a certain English name or Western name to sound like venerable or respectable, but whatever. That's just the truth. But
yeah, but I think a lot of that conditioning is starting to get erased.
Yeah, it is absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, well, thank you for coming.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me.
I love chatting with you. I've always find it really inspiring. We and I was just telling him, I was
your
just,
archive.
I was just like, this guy's fucking brain, man. It's just you are like a dimensional creature from from another dimension, and somehow I have access to you, and I'm just like, this is amazing.
You know what's also interesting that we were talking about is that, at least from our knowledge, you've never done any sort of psychedelics or any sort of drugs before, right?
I'm a control freak. I love being in control, and I don't like being. The last time I had anything was an edible, and it really fucked with me, and I had one of the worst. That's why I don't drink. I don't do anything. I think for me it's coming up with weird shit is just a matter of being in a flow and having a practice, and and just knowing how to channel that part of your brain on a regular basis, I guess.
Yeah, it is interesting. I was saying that I feel like I was telling him that there are just some people who are kind of psychedelically unlocked, And I think that probably most people, depending on culture, maybe there is some biology, some chemistry or whatever, but it's like, I think the society sort of is designed to put this layer upon you. And I think if you're able to like remove the layer or see through it or make it translucent, I feel like you're able to access that stuff. For me, I feel like a lot of it was blocked. Now, like watching your stuff now, like from when we first started communicating, like back in 2012 or whenever, like totally different, night and day. Like I remember having a whole like Andrew night, and I was just like watching like everything, and I was just like, everything means something totally different to me now. Like you were watching, the Flesh Nest, and it was like extremely terrifying to me. Like it felt very scary. Like very scary, like even like when I was watching it now on my phone. Yeah. Like, but I enjoyed it too. But it was just very much like, wow, like I don't want to be transported to this world. I mean, Flesh Nest felt like there's a little bit more of a rawness, there's a little bit more of a grit, and you see the aliasing on the on the like polygonal stuff. But it's like, watching The Gate, it's like there is this kind of amazing ability to kind of go, all right, I know Bjork's real, okay, and I know that's CG probably, but then there's this whole middle ground that you're really good at. Not like, I can't tell how you did it. I don't know if there's a grading process or just a textural thing you do in pre-production or in production design, but like I like that I can't tell.
Thank you.
It's like you do a better job than what, and that's fascinating to me, because I feel like that allows me, somebody who's very aware of the technology, to be able to be like, I don't know, and this makes me transport to this so much more.
I think those two pieces next to each other, Flesh Nest and The Gate, are interesting, because The Gate was like the premium like meal, like it was like a nice dinner, like everything's glossy and packaged. Yeah, like that one has like the full on effects premium like treatment, like, and it's we spent the most money, we spent the most hours just really making that. The Flesh Nest was like all about the opposite. It was all about like deconstructing the whole thing, like taking like the how like there's just a look to VFX breakdowns, like making that the language of the film, so they're kind of the complementary, I guess, and that they're like trying to achieve, they're both really layered, but they're both, the goal of both is very different.
But was that the intention of Flesh Nest?
To be honest, like Flesh Nest was an experiment. After finishing it, I was like, man, I really need to do something more narrative, But like the whole point of Flesh Nest was to build a world, and I think in building it, it just became really boring to me to try and convince us that this world is real, and to convince us that it's layered or that it's seamless. And it became way more interesting to me to like just be really honest about it as a construction. So that's it definitely became part of that process I
think maybe that's what's scary to me about it, because like I've always been like very phobic of like early 90s CG, like Lawnmower Man shit. And so like there's something about its falseness, and also just my own personal fear of like, everyone escaping in VR, there's sort of it was weirdly transdimensional for me, but in this like, I'm trapped in a dimension I don't want to be in. I'm trapped in this faux dimension, and so I think that's what scared me the most, was just the kind of the ugly grittiness of like the creatures and how they moved and how they animated,
I admit I'm a little grossed out by it too. I think it became a little grosser than I wanted it to, or like it did. I mean, I think a lot of stuff I make, it ends up becoming darker and more messed up than I originally intended to, where like I really meant it to be more playful. But so you're not the only one. Like I think it's just a tendency of mine. I just tend to be a bit heavy-handed, but I think the whole also point of the whole thing was just to kind of be an assault on people.
Assault on people's senses.
Because I find that sometimes, when I'm making stuff, they come out darker than what I intend. And,
it happens.
And it's interesting. I think that to take something from a dimension that's in your head, right, and then put it into reality, suddenly reality requires the transposition of judgment, of morals, and all those
totally
things. So
it becomes really scary.
That's not evil or scary or gritty or dark or
it's just a thought, but then when you realize it, you're like, oh my god, there's like a lot of responsibility here.
But it also kind of goes back into your head, like, Like when I did Vitalik, it was a lot more playful.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like suddenly, even though I still think it's playful, like I was like very much like, there were people who were very repulsed by it. And I was like, should I be censoring myself then? You know what I mean? So it's interesting that you are very aware of that sort of darkness that kind of comes out.
I think that's a really real part of filmmaking, right? Is you have an idea, but then it takes so much work to rally everybody to make it. And then there's the reception of it, which is like something totally out of your control. It's very vulnerable and it's very powerful to think of what you put out there. So, and that's something that, you know, totally confessionally, I'll admit that, you know, it scares me to move into narrative, because I think when you start telling stories, you are communicating a whole bunch of values and you know, it's really vulnerable thing to do. So
have you been writing like a script right now?
Yeah, I've actually written 5 screenplays in the past 2 years. 2 of them, one of them I am dying to make, but it's pretty ambitious. It's about historical Asian stuff, like Asian American history, but like trying to interweave that into some folkloric and you know, supernatural stuff.
Oh no, I was gonna say, how is it for you, that process of going from something that's so kind of, I mean, as we're describing it, you know, visceral and grotesque in certain ways, and very like aesthetically powerful, to something that is more narrative focused, you know? I mean, did it take you, like, because you said you did 5 screenplays, so did you find that through that transition of doing the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, that you saw some sort of like growth in the way that your perspective was shaped narratively?
Totally. I mean, I feel like so many directors in our industry, we all are so hasty to make a movie, and I know that for some people they have no problem just write, like they've never written a script before, they write it, they dedicate years to it, and they make it. But for me, it's like I'm just really acknowledging that writing is its own craft and its own method, and I think if I'm gonna spend years on this, I need to get just better as a writer. So I think that's why, like, you know, the first couple scripts I've written, I'm proud of them, but I know that they were a stepping stone to realizing this or this other idea. And then, you know, so like, I think for me, it's like, I'm just trying to get better at the process of writing before choosing. I'd rather like create a garden of ideas and pick the best one rather than just like putting all my eggs in one basket. But I think for me right now, like politically and just emotionally, and I'm really tired of, I just think there's a lot of stuff just out there. And I just feel like it's
kind of like vomit.
It is like vomit. I think the way in which we consume things is just, it's easy to put out an image and just it's like so disposable. And I think for me, writing is like the ultimate monastic like practice of distilling what you care about and what you want to say. I have a certain degree of confidence that like I know how to tell a story, but the practice of like vomiting out a written idea, re-editing it, figuring out what it is that you don't like. Is it the point of view? Is it the structure? Is it a value system, a premise underlying your concept? Like being able to diagnose what's wrong with your writing, I think is the hardest. That's like the key to writing, right? Or like when I learned how to draw, the first thing I had to learn to do was how to just vomit out how to actually translate what I'm observing onto a piece of paper without editing myself. And of course, when you do that, the eyes are going to be too close together. The feet will look weird. The legs are too long. But then what you have to start doing is like learning what are some formal things that I generally need to know about the proportions of the human body? How do I translate that when I'm looking at something? How do I proportion out? Okay, that's approximately where the hip bone would be. That's where the, this muscle would link to that knee joint. Like I think to know the anatomy of something and to be able to diagnose it real time as you're drawing, I think is the next challenge, right? How do you become an editor of what you're doing? So I think that's what I'm still trying to do as an artist, as a writer. But I think to own your work is like the most important thing. I think as a music video, you don't own anything. And I think that's really sad. And even though you're creating 50% of the work,
sometimes more.
Yeah, sometimes more. There's no residuals. There's no. So sorry. Long story short, my investment in narrative right now has to do with like the economy of what we do and how difficult it is.
Yeah, I feel like that's an interesting. Like I definitely feel like getting in the videos is very strange for me because my interest is always movies. I liked videos when I was younger. And after a while, I realized, oh man, I'm like bending this medium so much to tell stories.
Yeah.
And sometimes I felt like I did a great job. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this didn't really quite work. And around, probably about a couple of years ago, I realized like when I wrote Vivi, which you read, like it was my first feature that I wrote, and I was like shocked that it kind of worked from the get-go. Then after that, while I was developing that, I've been writing all these other projects, and it's interesting when I you kind of develop this process, you sort of develop this sort of thing where you're like, everything is organic, but there tends to be these recurring patterns. And for me, it's very much similar to the drawing thing. You just sort of are like, let me get this out of my head real quick. Let me just keep moving. And you just kind of can recognize when you're sort of just getting stuck on a detail and when you're actually stuck. Yeah. And very few times you're actually stuck. You can actually just go, and just not judge it. And that's the hardest part is like when I get to a scene and I put the header, I go, I don't even know if this is the scene. And sometimes it's just like, shut up, brain. Just feel it out, finish it. Right. And 9 times out of 10, like that's like the hardest part.
Yeah, the hardest thing is to get over that hump. Just to write it, even though it's dumb, just write it anyways.
Yeah.
But you're right too that sometimes you need to move on from an idea to be able to pick out the themes that were in a previous script.
Totally. I realize like I just write and then the movie will tell me what the theme is. Totally. I feel like some people though are very much like, this is what I want to talk about. But I'm like, that feels so not organic to me.
Some people are good at that, I think. But some people may be able to say that too after having discovered it over time. Yeah, I think the more you make it a practice, the more ready you will be to walk into a meeting and be like, yep, I want to say this. But you only know that because you've spent fucking, days and days and days on end just sitting with it and it revealing itself to you.
So you're saying like the muscle that you have to access in the mind or whatever, like it gets easier and easier to realize, oh, this is what I think I'm trying to say.
I think so. I think with some help and feedback and talking to people about your idea, it kind of reveals itself. But
what sort of advice would you give to someone that wants to get into writing a screenplay but doesn't know exactly where to start?
I think for me, the hardest thing about starting writing was just being willing to sound stupid. The truth is, your ideas are not stupid. The fact the worst is when you see something come out and you're like, oh my god, I had that idea like 5 years ago. But the difference between me and them is that they acted on it. So like getting over the self-critic to just start writing, period. Just to like get comfortable in the practice of writing, even if you're not totally satisfied with what's coming out, to like commit to it. Like as long as you show up, that's more important than what comes out of that session.
So what do you do to stay disciplined in that?
I think they teach you these anatomy things about screenwriting that actually I found really paralyzing. Because they would be like, this is what you need to know your log line. You need to have a protagonist that wants something, and you need to have an obstacle, subplots. And when I started creating stories that way, I actually found it really completely paralyzing because it felt very like a dead process to me. I'm a linear person where I think of things in like literal sequence. So I just...
Wait, what do you mean?
Like this happens and then that happens and then that happens. And that's how I come up with an idea. The same way where you're just putting down your pencil on a piece of paper and you just start tracing and you just start going and you don't really know what's going to happen.
You're like hyperlinear.
Yeah. So I think basically I'm talking about subconscious processes of creating where you don't know what you're going to do. You just show up and you just start riffing. And that's, to me, was step one in like learning how to be a writer, was like opening a blank page and just starting the vomit draft, where you're just literally vomiting your ideas out onto a paper. Scene one, like.
Well, no, I asked that because, both of you feel, and just from knowing both of you for as long as I have, you both feel like very instinctual thinkers. And when I take photos, and I'm just going to use photos for instance, but it's like when I'm there, I generally set up parameters, and within those parameters, I create something within the parameter, whatever. If it's like, I'm going to cover myself in Vaseline and the lighting's going to look this way or whatever, you know? And, which is kind of a funny example to say out loud. But
do tell more, yeah.
But that is something that I do.
Yeah. But I think here's another thing though, is you gain the confidence to do that because you just started taking photos, right? Like there was a certain point in which you just started doing it. And then after doing it enough, it wasn't a question anymore of how do I take this photo? It became like, what do I want to say? And then that's when you start setting up these broad, big picture parameters for yourself. For me, another analogy for me is drawing. Like I'm so comfortable drawing now that it's not a matter of like, if I mess up a sketch, it's like not a big deal because drawings are no longer precious to me. I know how to draw but it's more now of a question of what do I want to draw and how do I want to go about it. For writing, I needed to get the confidence of just writing, period. Because as a writer, you're constantly trying to solve something that you don't know how to get out of. And being able to sit in that discomfort and know that if you just write your way through it, you will find a solution. So
you're like kind of like building, interesting. So like through the first draft, you're sort of building your sandbox.
Yeah.
And then you go, cool, these are the these are the toys, these are the things, and these are now, okay, now let me move them around. Let me move the puzzle pieces
around. That's a much more succinct way of putting it. Yeah, you're just dumping all the toys out and just seeing what you have. And then,
That's
you're constantly adding new tools.
That's very fascinating because I think what's nice is that's a great counterpoint to what they do teach you. Like, totally. I would say like I'm probably in between how he works and in between how like they teach you to work, which is you're supposed to you're basically supposed to be like, what do you want to say? What is your point of view? Yeah. What is your log line? You create an outline. An outline is basically just like a little note page of like maybe 20 beats of what your story is. There's different ways to do it. There's the Joseph Campbell hero's journey way. There's just the simple sort of 5 plot or 8 plot sequence. And they're cumbersome because I think I also think just people's minds, artists' minds are very different. So like certain people, like for me at least, I feel like whenever I would go through that process, it was dead. It was this weird limiting. I always felt like I got stuck. It felt like working on a math problem.
Yep.
And so I felt like I had to do these things when I'm like, wait a minute, I should just be kind of feeling this out. And I think if you watch enough movies, you like enough movies, I really think that after you just start fucking around and being kind to yourself, the biggest thing for me is being kind to myself. Like that's very hard.
I think that's
very hard. I'm still very mean sometimes to myself, but like working on this anthology series with Martin, it was like literally 20 minutes, 20 pages. I have to sell this idea where he changes his voice and whatever, and then I got to end it. And I find it so empowering to do this linear process because normally I have an outline. I know how it ends, blah, blah, blah. But it's really fun when I go, I kind of know these little beats, but I don't really know how this is going to end. And then I just go, I'm on this journey now.
Yeah, creative ignorance can be your best friend.
I like saying naivete.
Yeah, naivety can be your best friend. And I just feel like, you're absolutely right. Like teachers are really bad at unlocking your creativity.
Goes back to just schooling. The way we teach kids is process. There's certain brains that are squares, and teachers are trying to say, be a circle, you know, or be a triangle or whatever. And it's just like,
I mean, it's useful, but only after you've been allowed to breathe a bit.
It's almost like it's if it was just sort of expressed in a way where like, we're going to teach you these processes. They kind of suck. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Eventually, when you guys get to a certain point, you're going to explore yourselves. Yeah. Then you're going to know what to take from these areas. Yeah. Sometimes I just start. Sometimes I go, I got the first scene of this movie, don't know where it's going to go, and I'm going to have the naivete to go and block all those other, because I'm friends with other writers who would just be like, what are you doing, Saman? And I go, no, I'm going to put you away. I'm going to put you guys away. I can't have this projection of you guys' voices in my mind now. Yeah. I'm just going to write this thing. And guess what? Yeah, oftentimes I get stuck. As soon as I hit act 2, I go, I got my act 2. Shit. And then I realize the rest of it.
I think we also have to be very sensitive to who we project our insecurities to, too.
Yes.
There's some people that that are very insecure about their own work, and then you project your insecurities onto them. And then
it's true. Some people can be really damaging and not the right ear for something that isn't quite like developed yet. So I think there is a certain degree to which I think one should surround yourself with community that shares the same values as you. yes, it's totally fine to do work for hire that you're not attached to. And yes, there are times where you do work for hire where you become attached to it. You put a lot of yourself on it, and then something sullies it, and you get really bummed out. Like, I think ego is just the weird shadow part of making work. It's like ego, I think, is important because we all, as artists, have a certain amount of drive and ambition to like grow our worlds bigger, as big as we can, and to amplify our voice and to share with people. At the same time, I think there is a degree at which you just have to also learn to let it go.
That's your bitch. Your ego is your bitch. Don't let it ever tell you that you're its bitch. And I feel like a lot of people
Ego
suffer
is my
from that.
bitch.
Ego is your bitch.
That's what I'm going to name the episode. Ego is your bitch.
Ego the bitch.
I think there is
Ego
a
the
degree
bitch.
to which, what you make is a trail behind you that people reflect back to you, and then you're like, no, that's not me, or is that me? It's like
it's your piece of poop 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, I see you ate.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you had for dinner last, and you're like,
exactly.
no, but that's not me anymore. That was me. And
I
don't
see
know,
you
like-
ate paper.
Yeah, right. But like, I don't know if you guys
And lead.
feel this, but like by the time I release something, I'm actually really over it already.
Yeah.
Yeah, but would you say, like, from an early age, Saman, that you were like a very vulnerable person and very sensitive?
I'm pretty sure. I don't know. There's a point in my life where I don't actually remember like how I felt, and I think a lot of nurture probably fucked me up a bit. But yes, I'm very emotive. Like I find that I've spent when we did our interview and just to now, like I feel like a completely different person. I feel a lot more opened up and vulnerable and very aware that like there are so many things that we consume that we should just be able to say, no, I don't want to consume that. Like I used to be upset when people would be like, I don't like to watch this. I would like to leave. Or like, can we turn this off? Can we change it? And I'd be like, come on, what are you fucking like, wussy? Come on, let's watch this thing, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm like, I respect that, Like I had to get out of a screening. I told you this. I had to get out of a screening of Jurassic Park. That moment where he like bites the guy in the toilet. Oh, and I remember that traumatized me as a kid. And then like, recently that sort of unlocked in me again. Yeah. And I said, I'm not judging this movie. I'm not going to say that this permanently is ruined. But in this moment, I feel very sensitive right now, and this hurts my feelings. Did I answer your question? I don't actually.
No, you did in a way, but I just think like just from knowing you particularly, I feel like you've had. I remember when I first met you, kind of like your exterior would be kind of like you would try to project some sort of like a strong kind of like a masculine, like strong, like direct approach, but the more that I started training with you in martial arts and doing like and just like understanding you more and understanding like how vulnerable you are and sensitive, I mean these are all beautiful things, but I just feel how sensitive you are, and it's a good thing, so I've been training martial arts for like over 10 years, and Saman recently started doing Muay Thai with me. Whoa. And I feel like that is a very intentional decision to make, because you kind of have to let go of your ego doing like sparring people, and just realizing that you're not that you are fragile, Yeah. No matter how like physically or mentally tough you are, because I consider myself pretty physically and mentally tough, but I can get broken. I've been
you're very
injured.
Tough. Yeah, you're very tough.
I've been injured.
Yeah.
I think one-on-one sports is actually really healthy. It is healthy in learning to commit and be in the moment when you're sparring with somebody, but at the end of the day, it's just a game. To like good sportsmanship and all, I do think that's like really good.
Yeah,
and it's like something discipline that you're committing to
exactly
for a long period of time.
And it's interesting because there's this unspoken thing with martial arts that if I'm sparring someone and I tell them, I've gotten into the practice beforehand to tell them I'll match your energy, which is me saying if you want to go hard, then I'll go hard. If you want to go light, then I'll go light. And then it's interesting to see that sort of ego play, because it's always an ascending approach. It's always escalating, right? So it's like, if I hit you a little harder, then you're going to hit me a little harder. And then it's always that thing, right? Yeah. And I know it sounds like ultra like masculine and everything, but
it's just call and response.
Yeah, it's call and response, right?
Yeah. But a lot of what I have learned is like communication with myself. really checking in with myself. Like I didn't realize until very recently, like I don't have a strong relationship with myself. I really do not. Yeah. And I think a lot of my work expressed me better than just my conversation with myself. It's almost like I had to make the work for my cerebral part to understand who I was. And that wasn't enough. Yeah. And now I have this interesting shortcut with myself. Right. And and I think you have to have that. I think that's why I was so fascinated with martial arts, is because even when I watch tennis, things that are one-on-one, right? Like these people or race car driver. I love race car driver, like Formula One, like, just the idea of endurance racing for 24 hours, at Le Mans. You're just like, these people have to love themselves. There's no way they could do this without being easy and kind to themselves. And it's interesting because it's a fucking sport where you beat the shit out of somebody, but it's like, there's so much love in it, actually. Yeah. Do you find, though, like, what about mentally? Like, do you have exercise? Do you have writing exercises, drawing exercises? Do you sort of, like, paint stuff?
I think I'm happiest when I feel like I'm only focusing one thing at a time. And
monogamy.
I feel happiest when I have space to really give love to that thing over long periods of time. I feel like I can actually have time to get up in the morning and, like, if I feel comfortable enough to draw. I think sketching for me is like I noticed that my dreams are like I remember my dreams and they're way more vivid if I'm drawing consistently every day. I'm sure you guys have similar times where like you just feel like you're having ideas all the time and you feel like they're almost driving you, like you can't stop thinking about them and you have to get it out. Like that to me I think is when I'm happiest. But I have to admit that is few and far between and that has to be cultivated. And I think being busy is one of the worst. I think being idle is great. Like I think
that's fascinating.
I think being busy is. I think we're so used to being like, oh, I got this photo shoot and I got this shoot and I've got this pitch to do. That is like I think for me a recipe of like killing your
creativity.
Interesting.
And to be honest, right now, I feel really fucking busy and I'm actually really stressed out right now. And I would say that it's just directly hindering my ability to come up with stuff that I really care about.
It's
interesting. Or like nurture ideas that I really care about.
So it's interesting. It's interesting. We were watching the performance video that you did with Rena. What was for the artist again? I forgot.
Kalala.
Yeah. And I was like, I loved how great that turned out.
Thanks.
And how just like, I mean, that's the whole thing's live action, right? There's no effects in that, right?
I'm trying to do more of that, to be honest.
That's great. And I thought it was so interesting to watch it because I was just like, oh, this still feels like you though. Like even though we were talking about the what do we call it? The Lego boob hallway, because it just had these like these little like like it was like it was like smooth.
Just for the record, Saman called it that.
Lego boob hallway.
Yeah, no, I mean to be honest, I did that project because me and Kalala had actually been working a full year to develop a trilogy. Like I wanted to do something that was like narrative, that was actually kind of funny and would show her like really different sides of her, and it would go from being like funny and like kind of like really intimate to like I wanted to have her on like a tarmac with like pyrotechnics synced to the music, and like I wanted to go like full out on but like but our budget didn't come through, so that video was like actually the last act of our trilogy. But like she's someone I wanted to work with forever because I love her music and I just love what she's about. And, I think what I really enjoyed about working with her is just that we had an ongoing conversation about, I think what I like about working with artists is that they're prioritizing or seeing something that maybe I'm not. And so we spend a lot of time, what I meant to say is we just spend a lot of time talking about ideas and what we're trying to prioritize in the story we're trying to tell about her and her life and her music, and like so I think I really grew from that, and I think that's maybe what I do enjoy about doing videos for specific artists where I can have that dialogue.
That's great. I mean, I feel like I've never really had that. It's usually been like artists just come in and I do my thing and I bounce, and then they're like, oh, we love it, and they either want to do more or not more.
I also think you preserving your ability to do your thing is like so sacred. Like you have to feel like you're given the space to just do your thing, and that so it's a balance. And I think everyone has their needs as a creator on what is important to them, and I think for you, like you're just a great storyteller, so your videos should have the Saman storytelling element in them, and you need an artist that can allow you to do that you're excited about, and
it's like you're supporting them, you know, in a way. So it's like, even though a lot of your sort of juju gets in there, it's really like I am supporting another sort of soul or brain, rather than sort of Fleshness being like very much like, this is, you know, this is an output of something that I feel like, or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is for me, when I work with artists, I do feel like I am part facilitator for stuff that they already want to do.
That's fascinating. I feel like you've had a very excellent selection of artists that I feel like are very much like in the same, they're almost like kind of just feel like they exist in your sandbox, you know. It's like
I feel I've been really lucky, and I think I'm just grateful for the community I've been able to have. But you know, I feel good. Yeah, I'm grateful for that.
Feel good. Ego the bitch.
You know, something interesting is Andrew seems to like have this through line with artists where he's kind of dealing with their emotional issues in like really intense transitions. With Bjork, it was with her, you know, after her divorce, and then FKA Twigs dealing with some trauma and transitional elements in her career and emotionally and health issues. There's definitely this like visual therapy thing going on. So we ended up catching up with Andrew while he was at Tribeca premiering his debut narrative, Rabbit God. We also talk about his FKA Twigs video, Cellophane, which just dropped. So here we go, bitches. Give me like just a real quick, catch up of like, how did the project come through? Did you hit her up? Were you guys in contact? Was it something you talked about? Typical commission job? Give us a little bit of the like, you know, fast forward version.
So in June of last year, 2018, she reached out directly through her management, and she just wanted to meet me. And, you know, I think she saw my video that I did for Bjork called The Gate. And she also saw my video that I did for Kalila. And I guess she also just said like she had been following me for a long time and just felt like now is the right time to reach out. I don't know, you know, within like minutes of meeting each other, we just went really deep. She shared with me, a few years ago, she not only did that she had a fallout with Robert Pattinson, but also had major health problems that, were pretty devastating for her. And also I think a third thing that, you know, she experienced was just I think suddenly becoming famous is really traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think a lot of artists, when you succeed, you're also under fire from a lot of people, good and bad, you know. And so I think the combination of all those things just really sent her body into a state of shock, obviously. And basically she said she wanted to do a video where she's pole dancing, and by the time I had met her with her, she had already been pole dancing for about maybe 6 months. And as a pole dance, like you would, when you saw her pole dance in rehearsal, you would not have guessed she was only doing this for 6 months, because she's just such a natural.
Mm-hmm.
So she like showed me some stuff that she was into, and like she, you know, we just started like bouncing ideas. And so I just came up with the idea of like, okay, let's tell a story of a woman who tries to be everything to everybody and tries to be perfect. And then, she has a fall from grace, and then it's kind of, you know, so it's like a Icarus story, of someone falling from the ideals of what they always wanted to be to everybody. And it's, I think Twigs, you know, when you look at her early work, or she had this hard glossy thing, and we knew that she was a dancer. We knew she trained hard. I mean, she excels at what she does in every way. You know,
I
she
can
directed
definitely
videos
see that.
herself. This is a humbling moment for her. So how do we tell the contrast of a story where she starts out like looking like dressed to kill, and then ending the video where she's totally just,
it's like the ups and downs of like confidence, and then like the crash, you know, that like the highs and lows of fame, or like, you know,
so extreme. And so for the rest of that summer, I did concept art, wrote a treatment, did storyboards, did lots of drawings, and did a lot of talking to her to figure out how to tell the story. And then when it finally coalesced into previs in the fall, by that time, you know, we had been raising money, and also it all kind of gelled in the fall, and then we shot in December.
there's an interesting thing between FKA Twigs and Bjork. I mean, it seems like they both kind of came to you. It's almost like a visual artistic therapy almost, because they were both, both went through some very traumatic things in their personal lives. Was that
It's always like
discussed?
post breakups too. It seems like.
I'm like, come talk to me, honey.
Yeah, you're the therapist.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Let's make a video. You don't need him. Let's fucking pole dance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I suppose I'm now the person that people come to when they want like a heartbreak fantasy. I think I suppose I'm good at, like taking someone's story, turning it into like a dream psychological visual journey. And maybe it comes from my own interest in psychology and my own interest in, my mom actually was a therapist. And I don't know quite how to answer that, other than like I do feel that I feel privileged and honored that these artists would entrust me with such personal stories, because it is a lot. As you know, every time a musician gives a music video to someone, they're putting a lot of trust
Totally.
to portray them in a flattering light, or to portray them and their sound or their music in a way that is authentic. So I'm glad that they trusted me to do that.
I guess piggybacking off of this sort of like pseudo visual therapist thing we were saying, like you have such an ability to get these artists in such a vulnerable place, and just even the way they perform, the subtleties, the nuances. And do you is that something, one, you're conscious about, like, or like as part of your process to sort of like break down the shields or do you feel like these people are coming equipped with just built-in trust because of whatever reason?
That's a good question. I don't think anyone comes in with built-in trust. I do have to earn it. But I guess maybe part of earning it is shutting up and letting them talk, and letting them know that I hear them. I mean, I suppose, you guys know, you guys are directors and creators yourselves. And it's like when you work with a subject in front of you, in front of the camera, you kind of have to perform for them, as a director, to let them know that you're on their side.
Totally.
That you are listening, that you're not there to intimidate them or make them feel uncomfortable. So you do have to develop a bedside manner. So I am aware of that when I'm working with anybody. It's just because, and it's not that I'm trying to perform for them. I guess it's just that I'm there to earnestly let them know I want to know what they're saying and what they want to say, and how I can elevate that or bring what I have to that. So I am just honestly coming in like an open book.
You are. You're taking over your mom's job.
I mean, I think
I think you said that it was probably a 2-day shoot, which that's a lot of shit. How did you fucking shoot so much so fast? Like, how much was super pre-planned? How much did you kind of fuck around with on set and work with?
This one and The Gate were both planned to a T. Like every shot I storyboarded and did animatics for every single moment. It's pretty accurate to the original. The only times where maybe we could like be looser was when she's falling, because there's so much chaotic stuff going on. And she trained so hard for this stuff. We want to see more of that. And so why not do a pole dance routine again, but shoot it with strobes and make it chaotic. And did you guys watch the latest Game of Thrones episode?
Yes, I did.
Did you? I just died. I died.
Yeah.
It's breathtaking. It's like
it's crazy.
Yeah, I think the more and more I really am, I really do believe stuff is made, like films are made in previs. Like good. I mean, but that doesn't mean there's no room for spontaneity. I love being spontaneous, but only after we've done that homework. So
yeah, it just doesn't make sense to just go in and not know what you're doing. You know what I mean? And like, it just takes me out when I watch an effects shot where it's like, hey, let's go handheld in this, scene, And I go, well, no, because you shot it sloppy. Like you have these like floating cut and paste characters on the screen now, It's like, you kind of have to do, you're right. You have to do your homework. And there's just some actors who like you just have to adapt for sometimes, I feel like too, like, and have to cut out some of those.
I think you do have to adapt. That is the one outline factor, is that you could plan this to a T, but if you have an actor or performer that only can work a certain way, that changes things. But speaking of which, that did just segue into the shoot again. Like, I mean, fact is, she had been training for so long for this. So the first thing we want to do is get that out of the way. Like, she was brimming and ready and like toned perfectly for this moment. Let's shoot that first. So we shot the 360 curtain world 1st. We shot the pole dance. We shot her entrance. You know, you just have to get the thing, like with dancers, and really great performers. All of their energy will be spent in the first 2 hours. And then after that, they're just dead because they're exhausted because they just like, you can't perform that over and over again. So she just nailed it. You know, she ultimately came out and just like did it a couple times. And like, you know, I think we shot the falling. No. Yeah, I think we did the falling and the blue screen stuff in the world above the tent on day 2, you know, and then all the mud on day 2 as well. So it's like we did performance heavy day 1, and then all the kind of narrative stuff on day 2 that didn't require as much. It was the blue screen stuff that was the hardest, actually, because it's just, let's face it, it's boring. You know, it's like not fun. Exactly. It's like, here, look at this blue box here. Okay, that's going to be like this beautiful thing in front of you.
And do you like paint a picture for them? Are you on like a loudspeaker and you say like, there's something over here, or do you
yeah,
just sort of?
Yeah, I don't. I try and work. You know, just go. I'm not I just go right up to them and I'm just like, okay. We had the mask, which was of the Sphinx. It was designed by her makeup artist, and so we had that 3D print modeled in ZBrush and 3D printed, and then we made duplicates. One was the one that the women wear at the end that heal her, and then the other one, the spare, we painted blue and put it on a stick, and that became the stand-in for the creature. And I have footage of her like stepping on this blue stick, blue mask, you know, like, again, it's all really, I mean, it's such an ugly, funny aesthetic, you know, looking at this visual VFX stuff, but like, and it was hard. It was not only hard because it was boring, it was hard because she was exhausted. Like her entire body was bruised up, you know, by the end of the day after doing all that pole dancing, because she's literally like slamming her body against that pole to get the velocity to move. And but I say that, but like Twigs is ever a pro, you know, she's just like, she's, as a director herself, she will do it until she knows that we got what we need, you know. So
she seems like an old soul, which you know,
yeah.
It's fascinating to watch her. I had the privilege of watching Honey Boy and watching her in it.
Oh yeah, I really want to see that. Actually, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I actually still think I have my preview Blu-ray. I might you just come over and we can watch it.
Oh, okay.
It's really good.
She's a great actress.
Yeah. Before I lose you, because we only got like 8 or 10 minutes or something. Rabbit God.
Yes.
First of all, congrats on Tribeca, my friend. I know we've been talking about like narrative stuff for a long time, and I know that you've had some other shorts that you've made, but you know, this definitely feels like a giant leap, I think, for you. Dialogue, scene, you know, doing cinematography that you've never done before. It's interesting. I'm coming at this because, you know, you're such a close friend that I'm like always like, yeah, you know, it's cool to just see growth. You're a person where, you know, so much of your brand is a certain thing, and I just admire your relentless ability to always be looking and working in ways that you haven't done before, you know? And I think you nailed it. So congrats there. Also, 4x3, fuck yes.
Yeah.
And I also really was impressed with like the kind of like Wong Kar-wai-ish, you know, cinematography, like in the kitchen and stuff. Like, it was very surprising. Like, I have a few questions. Like, how did the project start? Is this something you always wanted to make? Was it funded? Was there a brief behind it that got you going? Like, give me the fast version of that.
Now, okay, well, I guess I've been trying to get a movie made for a while now. I've written multiple scripts, and I've been hovering over certain themes. And then Nowness came along and we're like, hey, we do a series called Define, where they commission artists to just all do films around a certain theme. So they commissioned this theme called Define Beauty last year. this year they wanted to do a theme called Define Sex. I mean, you know, Define Sex is kind of loaded, you know, especially for me as someone who. So I pitched a few ideas to them. One of which was like maybe a gay love story between two like Asian men, which frankly, again, I've never wanted to be known as an Asian director, and nor did I ever want to be known as a gay director. But here I am, like, I don't know if
you're doubling up.
Oh, well, I just can't. I mean, Define Sex is like, well, what am I going to say about that? You know, like, sure, I could just make some kind of kinky thing that's non-narrative, but I was like, let's just try to tackle this a bit more earnestly and also tell a story while we're at it, because I do want to move back more into narrative work. I kind of started writing a short film for Nowness and using Cinereach's resources to kind of also just develop it in light of the features I'm writing. And it kind of evolved into this story about a Chinese restaurant worker that falls in love with a god. Then it just became a narrative piece. And I'm really proud of that because I frankly just really need to move in that direction. You know, I think if a lot of effects artists and effects driven directors get stuck, it's a craft. It's not useful if it's not being applied to something that means anything, that touches anybody. Mm-hmm. And so I now have to reallocate my resource to working with actors and script analysis. And it's just, as you know, it's just a different part of your brain. I don't mean to sound like a jerk, but like the Twigs video was such a dream and it was so rewarding, but I wouldn't say it was particularly challenging for me because at this point I know how to speak that language and I know how to storyboard. I know how to pre-visit. And then at that point, it's about working with a team and expanding it out. And like I've done that many times for different artists before. But Rabbit God was way more personal, way more difficult, and way more challenging as a new piece for me, as a growing piece for me. So,
but is there like a specific reason why you chose to do this particular piece as your narrative debut?
Like my mom used to drag me to like Asian American film festivals as a kid, and I like hated it because like there's so many bad films and a lot of them were just like jokes about food. It was just like, oh, this feels so like piddly, you know, like I want something bigger than this, you know. Ironically, as I'm older and more mature, I feel like I'm turning back to my community and being like, okay, so how can I tell a story about me and my community that is bigger than just like a rice joke film, you know, like or exactly. Like a sushi documentary. Like I want to make a film that feels as big. And when you think about people like Bjork or Twigs or any of these artists that bleed their heart out and then take that story and make it into like a bigger narrative, why can't I do that? You know, why can't an Asian gay man do that? You know,
so, I mean, speaking about, you know, how we were talking about the Wong Kar-wai thing, but have you seen that film Happy Together?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Happy Together to this day is still, that's the only queer Asian film that most of us can rattle off of the tip of our tongues that still holds up. It's like great acting. It's like,
oh yeah,
the set design of the hostel they're in is like so dope, you know, like, and it's, when you look at the film, actually, it's dingy, but the set is actually quite massive.
Mm-hmm.
And
totally.
The tiling, the attention to detail in that film is really subtle, but like extremely effective. And, and so I think what makes Happy Together so great is it's a story about two people at the end of the world together, like the edges of civilization, you know, it feels like, you know, and like there's something that feels so there's such a longing to that all of his films have. Mm-hmm. So I think I tried to bring that logic to this film where it's a god that appears in the flesh, an ancient god that just happens to appear at this restaurant and looks like a K-pop star.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's like, you know, we've seen, you know, there's a lot of sexual awakening type stories. And it's interesting to hear your sort of, even when you started this, you were kind of like, there is a lot of that. And I think a lot of people also, kind of are using that as like cards, and
Sure.
sometimes it's dishonest. And when I watched it, I felt like I always thought I was kind of grounded, and then I kind of lost my grounding. And I guess that's probably intentional, because that's kind of how the character feels,
Mhm.
But it was interesting to sort of feel how, like, I don't know, like it got kind of mental healthy for me, and maybe that's my own sort of projection. But I just love the idea that, like, there were times where I'm like, is that other guy even real? Because he's so different looking, and I guess like because he is a god, that you explain it, like that's probably why. But like it was like, especially when he kind of became the rabbit god
Mhm,
at the
mhm.
end, and was
Yeah.
like, kind of almost, turning into that person, the K-pop star.
Yeah.
Like there was something about kind of loving yourself almost, or maybe, that there's just something, I just love that. And I think we're in such a great time right now where like that's the kind of food people need and want, because like we all need to sort of self-reflect. And the sort of 20th century black and white, this is what's happening to the character, I feel like it's just get out of here, you know what I mean? I love
It
that.
is.
I love that
I think
this film,
yeah.
like,
Yeah, well, I think your that response you just gave was totally accurate. Like this piece was kind of a piece of therapy for me, and I think we all are in the job of being self-reflective, while we make stuff. And for me, yeah, I was reluctant at first because because I have to melt a lot of defenses in order to tell this story, and then rally a whole crew of people to tell it with me, and for me to have to be that vulnerable in front of them. Making personal work costs something. It costs something from your soul. I think it will often, that kind of vulnerability, I believe, does pay off, I think, for audiences, and because then they feel humanly connected to it. And
well, they also lower their shields too. I find that as a filmmaker, you kind of have to speak in code, but like if you're willing to be vulnerable and it's honest, like the viewer is as well,
it's very
And
true.
I guess that segues into this next question, which feel free to answer as specific or as vague as you want, but like, look, how much is you in here? Like, how much is exaggerated? How much is, like, are you both of those characters? Are you the main character? Like, how do you sort of?
I would say, but should answer your question, yeah, I would say I'm a bit of both of those. I mean, I would say mostly I relate to the main character. Like, I felt like my coming of age, first sexual experiences were not these moments of ecstasy, but were quite scary and fraught. And I feel like, as I think it is for many teenagers, and I suppose the God character is kind of like everything freaky that I've, like in my,
Yeah,
that creative me is like so used to, like, I'm like, uh, creative me is so used to inventing wild shit that like,
mhm.
how do I like actually merge these two parts of me together?
Yeah.
And I guess that's sort of what happens in the film.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's totally how I was literally like, okay, the guy in the restaurant, like to me, I was like, the guy in the restaurant's like, is like the Andrew that I talk to and I hang out with. And then it's like, and then the K-pop star is like the freaky Andrew that comes out in his work, like
Yeah.
that's why I think it got very mental healthy for me, because I was like, these two characters are Andrew, like
Yeah.
this feels like self-love kind of shit, like,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
it made me very emotional. I was definitely,
Yeah.
something that you seem to do a lot in your work as well. And going back to something you said about, there's definitely like the way you sort of intertwine like, Oriental or Chinese sort of iconography. There is something kind of, freaky deaky about it. And like, I'm always fascinated, like kind of sometimes how scary it feels.
Mhm.
It's never like sort of like happy. It's always kind of, it's complicated. And I'm assuming that, is there something there?
Oh,
Like,
totally. Yeah, like, I mean, like the double happiness symbol that you see everywhere, like in Chinese restaurants, or those prosperity symbols that you see sometimes on the sides of banks, or like they like, it's so mysterious. You're like, why wait, what is that? What are these symbols? or even the cross, or like other Western symbols that are around that we take for granted, or like the fleur de lis, like what, why, like where did it even come from? Like, what it is there's a lot of gay films where sex is like a site of liberation for the gay community, which is why kink and stuff is often so celebrated. But like pride is often seen as like, flag waving, and it's just like some kind of, like celebration. But for me, like confrontation of my sexuality has never really like been that like walk down, like that, like saunter down the street. It's always been like, sorry, what I'm trying to say is making a piece about my sexuality has never been this celebratory, like, thing. I see it as something quite strange and alien and bittersweet. And here we have like the ending sequence in The Rabbit God is basically a sex sequence, but it's him like digging a knife into his chest, and it's blood filling this what is otherwise like a prosperity, like a love and prosperity symbol, so I wanted it to feel like a sacrifice of some sort. Like he has to kill a part of himself in order to actually feel something.
I know that when we talk a bunch, we kind of talk about how, like, every time you do like a really personal project, it always feels like you kind of died and like and then get reborn. Like, I mean, I know you're kind of in the festival mode now, but like what's kind of like your rebirth story after this project? Like, has it reaffirmed something? Has it shed light on something? And how does that relate to what you're working on now, etc.?
I think the best thing to come out of Rabbit God is that I know now that, the piece I'm going to make is going to share a similar thematic logic of like immigrant story with Chinese mythology. So the feature film I'm making now is called Tiger Girl. It's about a Chinese American girl in the 1960s who discovers a tiger living in her attic. I'm excited to make a film that is affirming, but equally complicated and lush and big, even though it's this. I think immigrant stories are so often so shriveled, and
that's interesting. I relate to you very much on like doing stuff because I'm Iranian, and it's funny how much like a lot of my team is like, why aren't we hanging that hat? Why don't we like fucking do more stuff about it? And I'm like, it's because it's got to be right, like I'm not a socially realism person. Like I'm kind of like this weird imaginary individual. I feel like my whole existence is just stuff I make up in my head. So it's like I have to figure out the right way to tell a story about somebody coming to the States, or somebody feeling kind of not Iranian but not American,
Of course, definitely.
And so I relate to you on that, and I know that we talk. Well, I'd love to off the record talk about your film when we're hanging out and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
So this section's actually from back when we did our summer recording, but we felt it was appropriate here because it talks about a near-death experience that Andrew had last year, and we felt it was appropriate to end the episode with this because it's a good sentimental punchline.
Yeah, I don't know if you feel comfortable about talking about this, but didn't you recently go through some sort of like traumatic injury or something?
So back in October of last year, I was walking and I was struck by a guy on a pedal bike, and I hit my head, and I had a skull fracture, a brain hemorrhage, and a fractured clavicle. And I was hemorrhaging out of my left ear, and I couldn't hear for a while. I don't remember the impact, both from brain bleeding and also, I was on morphine. Yeah, I realize I'm just like sharing all this on, but anyway, long story short, I had a serious head injury. The clavicle has been the most annoying, but I also feel like clavicle breaks are really common. Like it's like one of the few bones on your body that's like designed to break. I mean, not, but I would say the lost time was really spooky to like not remember the impact, and not, my partner pretty much like took care of me, like bathed, dressed, and fed me.
Oh, wow.
Like 48 hours of me in the neuro ICU, like they didn't know if I was going to be a vegetable or not, because they do like cognitive tests with Henry, like just like, do you know what year it is? Who's the president? Like, and apparently
you
I
said
was
Obama, right?
I was like Hillary? No, I don't know.
You're in an alternate dimension.
Totally.
You're like, please tell me this is 2020.
Yeah.
Please tell me this is 2020.
But apparently I was failing those tests. Like I wasn't able to answer.
Yeah.
For a lot. So I think that was really scary.
That's super scary.
It was like a big wake up call of like, like often after, people who've experienced car accidents or traumatic stuff like this, physical traumas, you do hit a period of depression afterwards. And to be honest, there was a point like where it really dawned on me that I almost died. And I totally like, lit a candle and wept because I was just like, I think the thing I was crying about was like, I was regretful about how much time I spent like hand wringing about my career. I spend so much time thinking about my career, minute by minute, strategizing, maybe being upset because something isn't going the way I want it to. And I think I just waste so much energy on a daily basis thinking about that, when really like I could just be enjoying the taste of something.
Yeah.
And just being grateful that I even had like family nearby to like take care of me. And I think something that I got really sad about was that like we are here for such a short amount of time, and that like I think I had like an outpouring of love from like a lot of people, and I was both like so grateful and like I felt very loved, but I also was really stressed out because I physically couldn't see, or I couldn't even respond to everybody at once. I couldn't take visits from everybody. Like,
I feel like that's common. Like
my phone was actually blowing up and I was like, I can't like respond. And I think that made me think about like, there is only so much time in the day in a given season, and you kind of have to prioritize how you want to spend that time before you leave this planet.
Well, I appreciate you spending this hour and a half with us. I mean, that means a lot.
No, but riffing off that point, like I had a call today where I needed to make a decision on a job, and I realized that I felt physically like sunken, and that was my answer. I was like, you know what? I think my body is telling me I shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the projecting the insecurities thing, or projecting negativity. It's like understanding the people that you surround yourself with, where that advice is coming from, and like why they're giving that advice. Is it from a place of insecurity about themselves, or is it a place of actual genuine advice?
Like, yeah, advice for you.
Yep.
For you, like specific egoless advice, for you.
And that's hard. That's always hard, because it's like some people will be like, oh, like the longer you know somebody, it's better advice. No, man. Half the time, parent advice is the worst advice. It's just sometimes I feel like, sometimes when you're close, my best advice is from literally sometimes people I just meet, and vice versa. Sometimes I'll meet someone, I'll say something, and they're fucking totally affected, and they're like, oh, thank you. And I'm like, what? You know what I mean? But because I feel like there is actually this non-thinking part of advice sometimes. And I think some people project, and that's thinking, by projecting.
My sister would always tell me, if you take someone's advice, you're subscribing to their values and their whole ideology, which is true. If you take someone's advice, you are validating the choices that they've made too. Which, so you have to be very careful sometimes. I mean, I don't know. It's tricky.
Yeah, like that's something that like I've recently been able to kind of like find this voice inside me that I'm able to like talk to, and usually I would say like 99% of the time will answer back correctly. Yeah. The hardest part is to feel that answer. Sometimes it's like if I'm in like a really dark place, or I feel very confused, like nothing that voice can say.
I just pictured like Angel and Demon Saman.
Well, Demon Saman is like a million Samans just talking.
So there it was, our episode with filmmaker and artist Andrew Thomas Huang. Saman, what did you think about the episode?
Dope as fuck, yo. I really love this kind of focus that we're getting in the show, where we're really utilizing this name. You know,
Yeah,
I
and
think
getting more granular.
Yeah, I think Artist Decoded is really about decoding the artist, almost like a little bit of therapy, a little bit more confrontational, and kind of just the way Andrew sort of is almost the psychotherapist for these artists. Like, that's kind of what we want to do, is we want to sort of get into the headspace of the artistry. We're not about the art. We're not really about the craft. We're really about just sort of getting into the psychology of what the fuck artistry is. And we would love for your feedback. Please keep telling us what you're liking, what you're not liking. It helps us narrow in, because this isn't just for us. This is also for you guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, please. Any sort of reviews helps. Please follow us on Instagram at Artist Decoded. For Yoshino, it's at Yoshino Studios. If you want to follow me, at Saman Kesh. The more followers, the more buzz. It really helps us, because, you know, we love yous. And we need some love too.
We need love, baby.
Love.
It's all for you.
It's all for you.
I think didn't we sign off the last time?
We did do that. We've already reused that one, but that's fine.
That's
Fuck
okay.
it. It's a jam. It's a pop song. You can play it. You can loop.